and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode number 94, and the title of this episode is Gold Slam Down Could Lead to an Horrific Event Days from Now. And the reason why I say this is because we have to go back in time. If we go back to April 12th of this year, gold was pushed down around $200 or so, and 3 days later, the false flag Boston bombing happened, and there was a bomb drill going on during that period. And right now, what we see today is that gold was slammed down around, what is it, like $50 or so, $49, $50 or so, and it's been pushed down. And there is a drill coming up 2 days from now, which is Friday, June 28th, which is the cyber attack drill called Quantum Dawn 2. And this is, DHS is preparing this drill where it will include many financial institutions and companies, and they will pretend that there is a cyber attack happening. And this is a perfect setup for something to happen. Something like having the banks shut down, the computer systems completely freeze up, you can't get to your bank, nobody can withdraw money, and we have to remember the CISPA bill is pending in the Senate. Now, during the Boston bombing, the gun bill was being voted on. And in the beginning of the Boston bombing, they were going and they were using the black powder in the bomb, and I believe they were trying to pin that on gun owners at the time. But what happened was DHS killed the cell towers and made it impossible for people to communicate with each other because they were afraid another bomb would go off. And they didn't realize that even though you kill the cell towers, people can still take pictures. And what happened was, when the cell towers came back online, all these pictures started to circulate all over the internet, and a lot of questions were coming up, and things weren't making sense. And then all of a sudden, we had a distraction down in Texas, and for one whole day, all eyes were on Texas, not on the Boston bombing anymore. And then after that day passed, we went back to the Boston bombing. They asked everyone to turn in their phones and their pictures, and they wanted to see what they had, and all of a sudden they came up with the suspects. And basically, the gun bill was in the Senate, and it was shot down. So instead of removing it, President Obama asked them to keep it in the Senate in a pending state. So right now we also have CISPA pending in the Senate. It's funny how all these things just sit there in the Senate. And now, since we have this Quantum Dawn 2 cyber attack drill coming up June 28th, gold has been slammed down. The stock market has been pushed up almost to 15,000 points, and we see things, all eyes back on the stock market. Don't invest in gold, keep pushing that down. And this is the same thing that happened right before the Boston bombing, 3 days before it. Here we have 2 days. So what can we expect? We can expect probably something to happen. Now, hey, it might not happen, but all signs seem to point to something might happen. Will it be the main cyber attack? No, I don't think so. Will it affect people? Will it might shut down some banks or make it impossible for people to withdraw money? I find it very odd that they're doing this on a Friday, starting at 9 o'clock going to 2:30, which allows the banks to be closed all weekend if something goes wrong. We're just going to have to stay on top of this and keep a watch on this. But this is something where it just seems like there are too many things happening all at once, and it seems like something is definitely going to happen. And I mean, the other things they can do is if this cyber attack does turn into a false flag, it gives them the perfect opportunity to pass CISPA, to use the internet kill switch to stop information, because they'll say we have to shut it off to stop the cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. And you have to remember back, the Boston bombing, we had the drill there. During the Sandy Hook shooting, we had a drill going on at the same time. During 9/11, we had a FEMA drill going on. So every time we hear a drill going on, it always seems like these false flag events happen at the same exact time, and this is why I'm saying this at this point. Okay. Now, let's move on here. There was an article with the European banking system is planning a haircut lower than a €100,000 limit. And basically what they're saying is the major issue is to rescue the banks in case of a bankruptcy, and like all show, the haircut of deposits even below €100,000 assumed. According to this plan that they've drawn up, the EU money to cover bank failure will come from deposits of large companies and bondholders, followed by deposits over $100,000 belonging to individuals and to businesses with fewer than 250 employees and revenues under $50 million. And we always know what happens after that. It never stops there. It will continue on to the everyday person, because this always happens, they always say they don't have enough and we need to take more, and it continually happens. And you have to remember, back in Cyprus right now, they are still under capital controls. Their money is still frozen. They can't, they don't have access to all of their money. They already took the haircut. A lot of it's been changed in for worthless bank stock, and the other portion of it is frozen. So nothing has changed there, but everyone has forgotten about it. If this happens in the European nations and they stay under capital controls, basically everyone's running around with no money, and all your money is pretty much gone. And in Cyprus, there's a lot of people sleeping on the streets who can't make it because this was their life savings. And think about it. If you had 20,000, 10,000, and it was completely frozen, and you were only allowed to take out a small portion every day, how would you survive? And this happened back in March, and now it's almost July. So think about that. Now, Italy is basically saying that it denies that it could lose up to 10.4 billion euros. And basically this article goes on to say the Italian Treasury has denied reports in the Financial Times that Italy risked losing 10.4 billion on derivatives contracts, and called the suggestion absolutely baseless. And I hate to say this, but every time a government comes out, or a government official, or a central banker, or a Fed comes out and says this is ridiculous, it's always the opposite that's going to happen. I mean, we can use examples in the United States. Back in 1929, the president came out and said in 1930 that the worst is behind us and everything should start improving. And in 1932, the large part of the crash happened. The Fed in 2006, 2007, and even in 2008, the Fed, Ben Bernanke, said the Federal Reserve does not forecast a recession in the near future, and that he said this in 2008. The subprime problem has been contained. He doesn't see unemployment going any higher, and they said all of this stuff back then. Today, they're saying the same thing, and I believe the French president also said not to worry. Now Italy's coming out telling you not to worry. And this always leads me to believe there is something to worry about. Anytime they tell you don't worry or trust me, it's always the opposite. All right, let's move on here. And an anonymous government official came out and said we made many mistakes were made during the 90s to get Italy into the euro, and today those are turning into more debt hidden in the official accounts. So something is going on there, and believe me, in the next couple of weeks you'll hear that they have lost probably about double of what they're reporting, because again, whatever they're saying, whatever they're telling you don't worry about, it's always the opposite, and it's probably a lot more than what's being reported. Now, another article has come out saying the next major crash is here. Gold is the major indicator, and I've said this too. Just something is strange happening, and everything that I look at and everything that I see, something just doesn't add up. Major players about to fall. Cities can't sell their muni bonds. The world is suddenly on the brink of severe cash crunch. More money printing on the way. And basically, people are getting out of the market. They're trying to... the sellers are everywhere trying to raise cash. They're basically liquidating. The central banks came to the conclusion that no matter how much money they printed to reinflate, it's impossible to make things better. They would create such large bubble that it would end in a total destruction. It's a no-win scenario, and it doesn't work. And the public opinion on all this is very negative, and there's a lot of fear out there, and basically people are getting their money out, trying to cash out before this market pretty much goes down. And we saw this in a couple episodes back where billionaires are starting to leave and cash out. Hedge funds are trying to sell their real estate. Investment companies who bought the real estate trying to pump up the bubble are getting out also. When you see major people getting out, that means something is up. It's only the small investor, the people who think that this is going to continually go higher and higher, higher, stay in. Almost like the stock market rally in 2008 and the real estate rally in 2008. 2005 all the way up to 2008. People were riding the wave, buying houses at the height of the market, and they bought something, for $500,000 or $300,000, and the next 2 weeks, all of a sudden, their real estate was worth half, or their stock, they lost everything because it went from 14,000 points all the way down to 6,000. And it took a while for it to be pumped up. And you have to remember, the report was that 38% of Americans lost the majority of their wealth during this time period. And whenever Ben Bernanke says, I dare you to get into the stock market, that is a sure sign that this baby is coming down, because they want everyone in so they can rob them as the market falls. And basically that's what's happening here. Okay, let's move on here. Now, there is rioting going on in Egypt. People are very worried. They're stocking up on food. They're stocking up on water. There's supposed to be these huge protests come June 30th. Basically, we're seeing this happen in Turkey. We're seeing this happen Syria. The war's bleeding over into Lebanon, and this whole area is becoming unstable. It's basically they're remembering the revolution back in, I think it was 2005 or so, or something like that, where this happened once before. And 2011. This is the second wave of revolution that started in 2011, and they're remembering back when they didn't have food and they couldn't get to the markets and things like that. And it seems like the whole Mideast is becoming unhinged, and a lot of countries that were taken over, that central banks were put into, and they were reversed back onto the reserve note of the U.S. dollar, the reserve currency. Are now those people see what's happening, and they want this puppet government out, and we're seeing this all over, and this is why we see this unrest happening. And then the U.S. government has hired mercenaries in Syria, trying to destabilize what's going on there. Russia knows what's going on. That's why they've placed missiles in Armenia. They're making deals with Cyprus for their landing strips and ports, and they're modernizing the Armenian base there. And basically, Russia, China, they all know what's happening. Iran, Syria, they know what's happening. And they realize that the U.S., the empire, is trying to hold everything together with Scotch tape, and they're trying to stop and plug holes, or whatever you want to call it, all over the place. And it is very, very difficult, because when a country doesn't want to use the reserve currency or have a central bank anymore, they basically kick them out, and the United States has to come back in and try to force them to revert back to the reserve currency. And when all these countries stop using the U.S. dollar, and they don't use it for trade anymore, they don't need it, so they get rid of it, and this money floods back into the United States, which then causes inflation. And we will see inflation when this happens, unless the central bankers can start the war and hide everything and blame another country on all of this. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Smith & Wesson sales are skyrocketing. Now, President Obama and the government might not have been able to create jobs or make the economy better, but they are the best gun sales people in the entire country. Basically, the firearms manufacturer Smith & Wesson reported a 30% increase in sales this year, and basically the President James Debney noting that demand is extremely high and doesn't see demand falling at all. And that just shows you the sign of the times here. Now, Bloomberg says New York City anti-stop frisk measures would help crooks and terrorists. And basically, right now there's a law in New York City where police officers can violate your Fourth Amendment, just walk up to you and say, I'd like to frisk you and search you for anything. And they're trying to stop this because it's unconstitutional and it goes against the Fourth Amendment. And I don't know if Mayor Bloomberg has read the Constitution, but he's violating it, and he took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And a couple months ago, he came out and said that he believes the Constitution is old-fashioned and maybe we should get rid of it, and we can see where he stands. But again, people are coming out saying this is completely unconstitutional. Can you imagine just walking out of your house and someone and a DHS officer or a police officer saying, okay, freeze, let me search you, and just take whatever they want? What are you going to do? Take money out of your wallet? This is illegal. I mean, what are you really going to do? They're just searching you and seizing anything they want from you. Okay. Now, Alaska becomes the second state to pass nullification of indefinite detention. They pretty much nullified the NDAA, and Alaska Governor Sean Parnell signed a sweeping nullification bill providing broad protections against indefinite detention violations of the Second Amendment and blocking implementation of federal identification program in the last frontier. And you have to remember, the NDAA allows the government to detain anybody they believe to be a domestic terrorist or a threat. They do not need proof. You do not get a lawyer. You're not you're not innocent until proven guilty. You are thrown into prison. I believe it's up to 1 year. And you have to remember, this happened during World War II, where we threw Japanese Americans behind bars and without proof, without anything, because we were scared. And the same thing can happen today. If you own a gun, or basically if you're thinking, if you are basically anti-government or a constitutionalist, they put you in a group which is a domestic terrorist or a radical extremist, and basically they can throw you behind bars. Because you have to remember, the Obama administration and the DHS have been classifying conservative Americans as terrorists. And there was a study done. The DHS study emphasis is on Americans who hold typical conservative or libertarian beliefs and classifies them in the perspective of radical extremists. Americans who are suspicious of centralized federal authority, fear their way of life is under attack, who are reverent of individual liberty, were among the government-funded study classified as potential terrorists. So you see how all this plays into the NDAA and how they're classifying everyone. And this is what all this spying is about. They are trying to figure out and put people in groups, so when the time comes, it will make it easier for them. And let's use our brains here for a sec. Now, we know the NSA has been spying on people, recording conversation, recording your web data, and tracking everyone and everything that's going on. DHS is using their fusion centers and tracking people. Now, are they really using it to find people, or are they just using it to spy on people? Because if this system, like they're saying, works so well, there would be a lot less crime, because they would know when all this crime is going to go down. They would know where all the terrorists are. They would have stopped 9/11, the Boston bombing. They would have known where Snowden was in a second. Put it this way, the NSA, the DHS, and FBI couldn't find the guy, had no clue where he was. They couldn't even stop him from leaving the country. Now, if he can avoid all of this, every single American can avoid being tracked. You have to remember also, in the Boston bombing, they had 9,000 police officers looking for one unarmed person, and they didn't find him. A guy or a woman who came out to smoke heard noises in the boat. Think about this. They have no clue or have any idea how to stop terrorists. All they know how to do is to spy on American people, because every citizen here in America, not every, but the majority, uses Yahoo Mail, Gmail, Hotmail, is on Facebook, is on MySpace, is on LinkedIn. It's the everyday citizen that is being spied on. Because I hate to tell you this, just like with any other type of criminal, terrorists aren't going to use Gmail. They're not going to be on Facebook posting what they're going to do. I mean, why would anyone do that? It's almost like criminals when Prohibition. Let's just use that as an example here. The government said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to stop, we're just going to stop all alcohol. Now, who were the people that couldn't get alcohol. Law-abiding citizens. They couldn't go to the market. They couldn't go to the liquor store and buy alcohol. But who did have the alcohol? That's right. All those people who don't follow the everyday law. They do things illegally, so they don't care. You can pass as many laws as you want. We still know how to get it. Same thing with the guns. Do you really think that it will stop gun violence? Criminals don't register guns. They don't buy them from stores. They don't wait 5 days. They don't have background checks. They do none of this. Criminals, terrorists, do not use Gmail. They do not use Facebook. They don't use LinkedIn to find partners and for business. They use many other methods which is off the grid. They don't pick up a phone and just make a phone call, and they do none of this. The only reason all of this has been created was all of us here in America and basically trying to place people into groups and who are going to be the troublemakers, because all of us use this technology and that's what it's for. Okay, let's move on here. Now, Obamacare. I've been over this, and for those people who are new, by the way, those new people, I've been getting a lot of new followers. Welcome, everybody. And Obamacare is a complete disaster. If the government needs to create a law and penalize and tax people for not using it, there's something wrong. And I'll take this a step further. If they're creating something and they need to have children and celebrities push this to woo people into thinking that Obamacare is cool, there is something wrong with it. It is definitely not for the people. And I'm just going to go and say this. They're using young children, just like in the DHS, to brainwash them and to train them in a certain way, the same way that Hitler did back in World War II. Because the brown shirts were made up, the majority, of younger children, younger adults, easier to mold, easier to shape, easier to make them think in a certain way. And I see this happening over and over. History repeats itself. Now, some people say history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. So call it whatever you want. Rhyming, repeating, it's happening again. And what's happening is every single law that's happening now is happening very slowly. It's incrementalism. The same thing that happened in Nazi Germany, it happens very slowly, so no one really understands what's going on until it's too late. Now, there was an article that says a hidden tariff on American citizens in the new immigration bill and in Obamacare. Now, what is this new hidden tariff or tax on the people? Well, the Obamacare mandates to go into effect next year will force employers to provide health care coverage or pay a fine to the government of $3,000 per employee if they fail to do so. This is a job killer and of itself, but it doesn't stop there. Now, I said this in my previous episodes. I gave a list of 7 different things that we know when things are getting worse and very close. When the government starts taxing people, penalizing people, and continually making it harder for people to live, we know the collapse is getting closer and closer, and this falls into that category. And there were other things when we saw more military training, like we saw in Miami, LA, with live round firing, to brainwash the people into hearing this all the time. When we see more false flags happening, when gold is being pushed down. I gave a whole list of these things. But let's go back to this. Under the immigration legislation, and it's making its way through Congress right now, there exists a provision that will allow illegal immigrants residing in the United States the option of being classified as a registered provisional immigrant, which means they can work legally within the United States. And it sounds great, right? But this is the problem. Under Obamacare, businesses with over 50 workers that employ American citizens without offering them qualifying health insurance could be subject to fines up to $3,000 per worker. So what are businesses going to do? They're not going to hire American people. They're going to keep it under 50 because they don't want to be fined. But what they can do, because of the newly legalized immigrant laws, they would be eligible to work but not penalized under the registered provisional immigrant. And basically, so businesses can hire these immigrants, and it seems like they're setting it up so these people are hired and the Americans are not, who have been living here, and they can hire all these immigrant workers, pay them less money, don't have to supply them health insurance, and all the American people are without work who have been a United States citizen living in America. And that is where we're having the problem here. And again, these laws were put into place to penalize and to tax, and this is what's happening. As you notice, more and more taxing is coming about. This is what happened in the revolution. This wasn't the cause of the revolution, but this was part of the revolution, where the king was starting to tax and place more and more laws on the people and make it harder for them to live free. Let's move on here. Now, cyber attacks. Energy companies at risk. There was an article out saying that the U.S. and oil and natural gas operations are increasingly vulnerable to cyber attacks that can harm the competitiveness of energy companies or lead to costly outages at pipelines, refineries, or drilling platforms, a report said on Wednesday. And basically this is just leading up to a cyber attack, letting everyone know, and they're building the case against cyber attacks. But what I found very interesting is that a DHS report points to Armageddon scenario. And they're using this report saying that, if like some type of EMP or some type of direct hit from a flare or something like that. But what interests me in this report is that it corresponds to a cyber attack, but they're using a different form of attack, which I think is bogus. But it goes on to say that more than 300 EHV transformers destroyed. This is in the document. I have a link to this document, by the way. I'm sorry. It's section 4.3 of the document. And it goes on to say that 130 million people lacking power for several years until damaged high-voltage transformers are replaced. $1.2 trillion economic loss. The scenario is based on the ionospheric electrojet centered at 50 degrees north, which is around Lake Woods County, Minnesota. And this is what this part of the report says. But again, if we go back to 2003, I believe they were doing a test on the power grid in the Northeast to see if they could bring it down, which they were successful in doing. And now this report is coming out. It is unclassified, so everybody can read it. But most of the people that read it see it, it's based on ionospheric electrojet or sun flares or EMP, so people kind of dismiss it. I'm looking at this as this was the study to see what would happen if they used a cyber attack to shut down the power, and how it would affect everything when they're going to do it. And again, as I said before, the cyber attack will be their main event because they'll be able to shut everything down and blame a country and get us into war, declare martial law, rob the people of their money from the banks, and get people really pissed off when the lights go off for a lot of weeks. And the only way to get people really angry is to have them die, get sick, and it as DHS reports, Janet Napolitano, the cyber attack is an equivalent to a nuclear explosion in the U.S. And it is an act of war if another country commits a cyber attack on the United States. Now, let's move on here. The FBI aids terrorist death ray plot to foil terrorist death ray plot. So basically, the FBI, if you notice, the FBI always sets up a person for a terrorist plot and then captures him. I don't know. I don't really find this as them doing great work. They know who it is. They convince the person to do it. They supply him with all the stuff, and then right before it happens, or maybe not before, they let it happen, they say they caught him because of their great work. They didn't do any great work. They're the ones who did it. If it was so great, why didn't they stop the Boston bombing? Why didn't they stop 9/11? I mean, right before 9/11, the FBI set up someone to, I think it was 1993, where the bomb went off in the World Trade Center, and they pretty much set that person up. Just a year ago, they set up the person that was going to blow up the Fed, and now they're, using this death ray plot, and it just seems a little ridiculous. And I don't even know if it's believable anymore, because if the FBI was so great at this and they can find these people, they would have found Snowden before he left the country. Okay. Now, on the people, if those people who are new, there is a form. If you look up top at the tabs, there's something called the people, and this is where people go on and they we exchange conversation on the economic collapse, and it's broken out into different categories. You can join up. It's free. I don't give away your information whatsoever. And also, if you like to join the alerts, you'll be the first to get an alert when I put out a new report. I do not send you any other email. From all my people who've signed up, they never receive anything else except for the report, and you can always unsubscribe if you want. But and I don't hand that out to anyone. It just stays with me, and I don't do anything with it. And so someone on the people, he is in Greece, and basically from time to time he lets us know what's going on. And basically, he's been telling me that the Greeks were unable to deliver a massive order for 5.56 ammo for the U.S. He thinks it's DHS, and he said it was screwed up because of the EU red tape, and the Greek army is slowly switching from the standard 7.62 NATO to 5.56, and the cops are switching from 9mm to 7.62. And it seems very strange that this is happening, that DHS couldn't get the order. I don't know if this is going someplace else, but it seems very odd. And he thinks it's very strange also, and he's just letting us know what's going on here. Listen, everyone, I want to thank everyone for listening. I really appreciate your comments on YouTube. Every so often I reply to your comments, and I just like to thank everyone for listening, and I really appreciate it. And something is definitely happening. Everything points to it from now until July. There is definitely something is going to happen. Many others are coming out saying that something is going to happen. You have to remember there are a lot of drills happening during this period. The collapse of the economy, they're holding this all together, trying to keep it from collapsing. They need to get certain things in order before the collapse. So even though the Fed is talking about tapering, they are not going to taper. they're going to continue to print because there's still a lot of toxic assets on the bank books. They still have to purchase the treasury bonds, so we will see continued printing, and I don't believe they're going to stop at all because what they're trying to accomplish and to capture everyone's wealth and to try to push all the countries back onto the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. I think they will try until the very, very end when they know there is no hope, and that's when they'll let everything go. But they're still doing it. They're not going to stop. So everyone needs to get prepared. And if you haven't started preparing, I would start now. There are just too many drills going on in the next couple of weeks, and especially with Independence Day coming up. Many people believe that there are going to be some type of event happening. So I would suggest starting now if you haven't. And if you are prepping, continue to prep. And yes, gold has been put on sale. Silver has been put on sale. So gold and silver is also a good thing to buy at this time. And, again, we saw gold and silver do the same thing in 2008. It dropped dramatically, and all of a sudden it skyrocketed right after the crash. So we're probably going to see the same exact thing happen. Listen, everyone, thank you for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks.